I'd like to introduce you to our plenary speaker. Lionel Laroche, who some of you may know already, is going to be talking to us about helping foreign trained professionals to integrate into the workplace. Lionel has a very interesting background. He's going to tell you more about that and why he knows so much about this subject. He's from France originally, now in Canada, has published a number of books around managing cultural diversity in the workplace. He has a technical background and so comes from a very solid place inside the organizational world. And for the past 10 years, Lionel has been teaching, facilitating, doing workshops and cross-cultural training, coaching and consulting with both individuals and with organizations. He's touched over 15,000 people in the last number of years in 8 countries, 4 continents. So he's really dedicated to helping professionals to really get the value and the gift of cultural differences in the workplace. So I'm very happy to introduce Lionel, and welcome.
Thank you. I'm going to suggest to the people who are at the very far back that they move forward. I know this is not customary in a plenary sessions, but I'm going to use the overhead projector. And so if you want to see what's on it, it might be more convenient if you move forward. I'll leave it up to you. I want to talk to you a little bit about my own experience and the experience of many of the people I've worked with. Let me give you a bit more background about myself. I have a PhD in chemical engineering. What I studied actually is distillation. The industrial sector that employs the largest number of distillation engineers is the oil and gas industry. So when I looked for a job in Canada, where should I have gone? It's obvious to everyone, right? Well, that's not the way I tackled the problem. The way I tackled the problem was this. I projected onto Canada the structure of French society. Yeah, I come from France, so it probably was mentioned before. All right, guys? So I projected onto Canada the structure of French society. The structure of French society says that if you want to be a somebody, if you don't want to have just a job but a career, in France there's only one place to go. Paris. In French we say Paris est le désert français, which translates into Paris or bust. So I looked for a job in the cities that to me were the Canadian equivalent of Paris. Montreal, Toronto, and Vancouver. It wasn't Ottawa, because Ottawa is the political equivalent, but not economic equivalent of Paris. So I looked for a job in these 3 cities, and my wife came to me one day and said, you know what, I may have a job opportunity in Calgary. Can you look for a job there? And my reaction was, in essence, over my dead body, we're going to Calgary. Because in my mind, if we went to Calgary, I would have no future, no professional future. I did find a job in Toronto that made use of, at the PhD level, but it didn't make use of my distillation knowledge. And actually I've learned in the 18 years that I've been in Canada that there were only 2 organizations interested in my distillation knowledge, both located in Calgary. So what's the point of this story? Listen to your wife. Yes, that's one point. But that's not the one I was thinking of in the context of immigration. The one I was thinking of is this. The biggest challenge that immigrants face. I'm going to focus on skilled workers. I will readily admit that I have no experience dealing with refugees. Okay? I've only dealt with skilled workers, people who came here because they have a high level of formal education, bachelor's and up. Okay? And in particular, I have a contract with the city of Toronto whereby they've sent me a large number of people who have a master's or PhD in a technical field so that I can teach them how to find themselves a job. Okay? And what I find is the biggest challenge that people have is not understanding the structure of Canadian society. And it's much harder than it looks. So let me explain it graphically, okay? You'll see that I'm an engineer by training, so for me a graph means a lot, okay? Alright, so we're going to look at technical skills versus soft skills. Can everybody see the graph? Yeah? So, I'm assuming everybody in this room knows what I mean by technical skills and soft skills, right? And you can have high technical skills and low soft skills. The typical stereotype of that in Canada would be the geek or the nerd, okay? And you can have low soft skills and low technical skills and high soft skills. And the typical stereotype of that would be the used car salesperson, okay, on this side. How do Canadian organizations break down their workforce? Well, typically what they do is something like this, okay? They break it down in 3 levels on each side: low, medium, high, low, medium, high, okay? Where do most immigrants end up on this diagram when they arrive in Canada? High technical skills, low soft skills, right? Somewhere here. Why do immigrants have high technical skills? Well, because of the point system, right? You can't come to Canada unless you have a high level of technical skills, okay? There's another very important point which is not mentioned, but it does matter a lot. It's the geographic location of Canada, which makes it extremely difficult to immigrate illegally to Canada. Okay? Think about it. How do you get there? Right? From the north, forget it. Okay? From the east and west, it's a long way to Rome. And from the south, if I cross the border illegally from Mexico, I will stop in Las Vegas. I won't go all the way to Toronto. Okay? So the point is, Canada is one of the few developed countries that has almost complete control over its immigration policy. Okay? Think about, if I remember correctly, the Auditor General has said that there's approximately 40,000 illegal immigrants in Canada. By comparison, in the US, anybody knows how many there are? 12 million. 30 times more on a per capita basis. Okay? So that is a huge number. And the point is this. When the average Canadian meets the average immigrant, the average Canadian assumes 2 things. You're here legally and you have skills. Trust me, that's not the assumption that the average American makes when meeting the average Mexican. Okay? If you have that experience. So, immigrants to Canada have high technical skills. Why do they have low soft skills? Because soft skills are measured by cultural standards. Okay? So they may have had excellent soft skills in their home country, but by Canadian standards, these soft skills don't measure up. If I take my own example, in France, I had high soft skills. I was the captain of the rowing team in my university. I was the maître d' in a restaurant, and I was the treasurer of the first career fair in my university. Okay? All situations that require high soft skills. When I arrived in Canada, overnight, my soft skills went from high to low. Not because I changed, but because the way my soft skills were measured changed. In France, we don't say something like, well, it's a good report. You may want to look at section 3 in more details, but overall good work. Okay? In France, we say, redo section 3, it's wrong. Alright? The way I gave feedback when I came to Canada was just blasting everybody. Alright? I'm going to come back to that point because it's really important. Okay? So, low soft skills because they're measured by Canadian standards. Now, what is the important point for what really matters is not where you are, but what is the relative weight that is placed on technical skills and soft skills. What do I mean by that? Well, in Canada, if I do the average over all jobs, what I find is the relative weight of technical skills and soft skills is 60-40. What do I mean by that? Well, this is roughly what people, the importance that Canadians place on these two. The relative weight will depend on the profession. What I mean by professional jobs, I mean any job that requires at least a bachelor to do it. Okay? Engineers, accountants, nurses, pharmacists, doctors, whatever. Okay? Teachers and so on. If I look at the average professional job, the relative weight of technical skills and soft skills is 60-40. It's higher in engineering and architecture than in social work and teaching. Okay, I think we all agree on that. So, but if I look at the average of all jobs, 60-40. The other very important point in Canada is that the weight that is placed on soft skills increases as you move up in Canadian organizations. Okay? It's absolutely striking, for example, in accounting, if you work with accounting firms, I mean, they are my biggest clients. What I find is, if you hire a tax accountant, what do they need to know? Taxes. Okay? But if you're trying to hire a partner, what are you looking for? The ability to sell projects to clients. So in other words, you're going from a hard skill to a soft skill. So the weight might be 80-20, technical skills, soft skills at the entry level, and it becomes 20-80 when you get to the top. So lines of equal value. By lines of equal value, I mean three people on this line bring the same overall package to the organization that hires them. Okay? The 3 people on this line bring the same value to the organization. Now, what is the situation in most of the countries where immigrants come from? And I'm going to take the top 4. Okay? Anybody knows what the top 4 countries of immigration to Canada are? China, India, Philippines, Pakistan. Okay? We're talking about countries that are quite hierarchical. Okay? In these countries, the boss is the boss is the boss. Which part don't you understand? Okay? You are a good manager in these countries not because you can convince your employees to do it your way. You don't need to convince them to do it your way. You're the boss, they'll do it your way just because you're the boss. Okay? But what you do need to know is how to do it from step 1 through step 27. Because if you forget step 15, what happens? People stop and come ask you, how do you want me to do it? So in these countries, the relative weight placed on technical skills and soft skills is more like 90-10. Okay? Most of the weight is on the technical skills. And it doesn't really change as you move up in the organization. So lines of equal value will look roughly like this. Okay? They'll be very flat. Now comes the crux of the matter. Let's say we have an immigrant here and a person born and raised in Canada there. Okay? And I've had that situation, it happened to me when I worked at Procter & Gamble. Okay? So, they're both competing for the same job or the same promotion. Who gets it? By Canadian standards, this person brings higher value to the organization. So he or she will get the job. Okay? This person gets the job. How does the immigrant interpret the situation? It's unfair, it's discrimination. Why? Because I'm bringing more value. This person thinks that he or she brings more value because by his or her home country standards, he or she does. But he or she is measuring his or her own performance by his or her home country standards, not by Canadian standards. And so the major challenge in my experience in all settlement agencies is to help immigrants understand the structure of Canadian society, and in particular understand where people fit, okay? And how to convince Canadians that my experience is useful here. So let me explain a little bit. The biggest challenge I find immigrants have when they come to Canada and they're trying to convince employers that they have skills that are qualified for a job, is that the way they look at being qualified is very different from the way Canadians look at it. Okay? What I mean by that is most immigrants come from developing countries, and in these countries, what is important is flexibility. There's very few people who have a Bachelor of Education and more. And so if you have a Bachelor or more of education, you're asked to do all kinds of different things. Okay? And so the way most immigrants will describe their experience is, I can do everything. Okay? I'm a civil engineer, I can build anything. I'm an IT professional, I can do anything with computers. Okay? What they're trying to say, and their resume usually screams that, is, I've done everything and I can do everything. Okay? What does that sound like to Canadian? Well, it sounds like this. Okay? You have a broad range of experience, but it's very shallow. You're a jack of all trades, master of none. What are Canadians looking for? Specialists. Okay? Specialization. We are a country of specialists. Even family doctors who are generalists, how do they describe themselves? Specialized in family medicine. Okay? So the point is, Canada is a country of specialists. Let me give you an example that will illustrate the difference. Okay? I worked with an Iranian civil engineer. When I met him, he said, I'm a civil engineer, I can build anything. So I asked him, okay, what have you built? Well, he said, I've built high-rises, bridges, tunnels, dams, and roads. I thought, okay, yeah, you're right. You have indeed a wide range of experience. So let's look at it a bit in more details. So I asked him, we did this. I said, okay, you have experience in high-rise, roads, bridges, tunnels, dams. Okay? So I asked him, okay, think of all the projects you've worked on related to high-rises. Put them back to back. How many months of years or years of experience do you have in that specific field? He said, oh, probably about 1 year. Okay? He had 25 years of experience in total. Roads, 1 year. Bridges, 1 year. Tunnels, 2 years. Dams, 20 years. How does a Canadian engineer with the same experience describe himself or herself? I'm a dam engineer, if you'll excuse the pun. Okay? And by Canadian standards, being specialized in dams is still too broad. Okay? His expertise was the retrofitting the instrumentation and monitoring systems of existing dams. And when he changed his description from, I'm a civil engineer, I can build anything, to I'm a specialist of retrofitting the instrumentation and monitoring system of his existing dams, he found a job at Manitoba Hydro. He had been unemployed for 2 years. Okay? So this is the biggest challenge in my experience. It's understanding where people fit. Okay? And in particular, and another thing is understanding how to network. How do most immigrants network? Typically, the first thing they do is join the association of the people coming from the same country as they do. Okay? So I'm Afghan, I will join the Afghan Association of Canada, or Ontario, or Alberta, whichever province I'm in. Okay? I'm from Venezuela, I go to Calgary, I will join the Venezuelan Association, Calgary Association, or something like that. Okay? How do Canadians network? Well, they don't network according to the same principle. The way Canadians see the world, or the professional world, I should say, is essentially like this. You have profession on one side, you have industrial sector on the other. Okay? So, what do I mean by profession? Well, you'll have engineers, okay? You'll have accountants, you'll have HR, you'll have sales, and so on and so forth. Okay? And each of these will be subdivided. For example, as an engineer, you have electrical, mechanical, civil, chemical, environmental, coastal, and so on. As an accountant, you have accounts payable, accounts receivable, and so on and so forth. HR, you'll have training, learning, succession planning, compensation, benefits, and so on. Okay, so each of these is very finely subdivided. On the other side, industrial sector, we have something like automotive, okay, oil and gas, finance, and so on and so forth. Okay? And again, each of them is very finely subdivided. Automotive, you'll have tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. You'll have off-road vehicles. You'll have like buses and trucks and so on and so forth. Okay? within oil and gas, you'll have exploration, production, and so on and so forth. How do Canadians define themselves? Well, pretty much they define themselves as the intersection of a line and a column. When you meet a Canadian at a party and you ask them, what do? What do they answer? I'm a profession specialized in one industrial sector. Okay? What does it mean? Well, Canadians essentially network according to the line or the column. If I go to a conference, it will typically be a conference of, chemical engineers, or a conference of payroll accountants, or something like that. Or I might go to a conference of automotive industry, or oil and gas industry, and very specific. Okay? And if I network, of course, most extreme example was coastal engineers. I didn't know this exists until I met a guy from Rwanda who had gone to Russia and he got his master's in coastal engineering. Coastal engineering is the people who design the harbors, jetties, and that kind of stuff. Okay? Now, it always baffled me why a guy from Rwanda studied coastal engineering, but that's a totally different story. Okay? That's now, but this guy made the same mistake when he came to Canada. He went to Toronto. Okay? Now, if you go to a meeting of PEO, what kind of engineers will you meet? Well, at PEO, 60% of the engineers are mechanical engineers, 30% are electrical engineers, the rest of the 10%